Every nation on Earth carries debt. The United States alone has crossed $38 trillion, the largest total in its history. Europe collectively sits in the tens of trillions. Japan's obligations tower far beyond its own economy. Even countries defined by oil wealth, manufacturing power, or trade surpluses are deeply indebted. So the question becomes unavoidable. If everyone is borrowing, who is everyone paying? This is the financial archive, where money, power, and history intersect, and where simple answers rarely survive. Debt is not just a burden. It is the skeleton holding the modern world upright. Wars, recessions, booms, and financial crises are all built on an invisible framework of obligations. Follow the trail of creditors long enough, and something unsettling appears. The world does not owe a single master. It owes itself. But self-ownership does not mean equal benefit. To understand how global debt climbed past $315 trillion, we have to travel back centuries, to a time when finance was not built in glass towers, but forged in desperation. Long before stock markets, central banks, or digital transfers, national debt emerged from a far older force. In the late 1600s, England was locked in an expensive struggle with France. The conflict drained royal coffers faster than taxes could refill them. Gold reserves were disappearing, trade was strained, and raising taxes further risked rebellion. The crown faced a choice between military defeat and financial innovation. Instead of squeezing the public harder, the government turned to wealthy merchants and a deal was struck. These private lenders would provide immediate funding for the war. In return, they would receive something unprecedented, a guaranteed stream of interest payments, backed not by gold, but by the future tax revenue of the nation itself. To administer this arrangement, a new institution was created, the Bank of England. This marked a turning point in history. For the first time, a state could legally spend money it did not yet possess. Out of this system emerged the government bond, a tradable promise, a weapon of finance, and a new form of power. Debt was no longer weakness. It became the foundation of empire. Other nations did not take long to recognize the power of this new system. What began as a wartime experiment soon became a blueprint for empire. The Netherlands refined it first, building sophisticated bond markets that allowed the state to borrow cheaply and reliably. Amsterdam transformed into a financial hub where government promises traded alongside commodities. France followed, using debt to fund wars, palaces, and political ambition. Though mismanagement would later bring catastrophe, the idea itself endured. Across the Atlantic, the newly formed United States embraced sovereign borrowing to survive its revolution, unify its states, and push its borders westward. Bonds financed railroads, armies, and expansion. Long before taxis could. Gradually, a new reality emerged. Debt was no longer a sign of failure. It became a signal of trust. A government that could borrow was a government believed to endure. Creditworthiness replaced gold reserves as the true measure of national strength. Empires no longer needed to seize mines or loot treasuries. They issued promises instead, contracts backed by law, taxation, and time. Interest payments replaced tribute. Financial credibility replaced territorial conquest. Power migrated from battlefields to balance sheets. The fate of nations was now decided not only by soldiers and cannons, but by interest rates, confidence, and the quiet authority of debt. Fast forward to the present, and debt has evolved into the most traded product on Earth. It moves more volume than oil, more influence than weapons, and more quietly than currency itself. Every government borrows as a matter of survival. Every bank lends as a matter of design. And every citizen, whether aware of it or not, is pulled into the system through taxes, retirement funds, insurance policies, and savings accounts. Nowhere is this more visible than in the United States. American debt is often described as a national liability, but in reality, it functions as global infrastructure. U.S. Treasury bonds sit at the center of the financial world, used as collateral, reserves, and safe havens during crisis. Contrary to popular belief, most of this debt is not owned by foreign rivals. The majority is held by domestic institutions, commercial banks seeking stability, pension funds securing retirements, insurance companies managing risk, and the Federal Reserve itself, which actively buys government bonds as part of monetary policy. Foreign governments do hold a portion, but far less than headlines suggest. Japan, China, and others are participants, not controllers. In practical terms, the United States largely owes money to its own financial system. The debt circulates internally, reinforcing the structure that depends on it. This circular system exists everywhere. Japan finances the U.S. supports international lenders. Europe funds development programs. Developing nations recycle reserves back into Western bonds. Every country holds someone else's IOU. Every promise is secured by another promise. It is a global game where everyone is using borrowed chips, and the game only works if no one stands up. Above governments themselves exists a force with even greater influence. The markets. While laws are written in parliaments and leaders are chosen at the ballot box, the price of survival is set elsewhere. Behind every government bond is a dense web of financial power: hedge funds seeking returns, pension funds protecting retirements, sovereign wealth funds managing national savings, and central banks steering entire economies. Together, they control tens of trillions in capital that move across borders at the speed of confidence. These markets determine which countries can borrow at low cost and which are forced to pay punishing interest just to stay afloat. A single downgrade, a shift in sentiment, or a sudden loss of trust can transform a stable nation into a crisis zone. When confidence disappears, currencies weaken, borrowing costs explode, and governments find themselves cornered by forces they cannot legislate away. History shows what happens next. Budgets collapse. Emergency measures follow. Political stability fractures. Entire economies can be reshaped in a matter of weeks, sometimes days. This power does not come from armies or votes, but from capital allocation. Democracy may decide who governs, but markets decide who is funded, who is punished, and who survives. In the modern financial order, legitimacy is earned at the trading desk long before it reaches the ballot box. At the center of this system stand central banks. They do not merely manage debt, they create Italiano. When central banks buy government bonds, they create new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every dollar is someone else's obligation. This system survives on confidence. When belief holds, debt rolls forward smoothly. When belief breaks, reality returns. Greece and Argentina and Sri Lanka. Each collapse exposed the true creditors: international lenders, rating agencies, anonymous bond. Yet, even after failure, the system resets. New loans replace old ones. Debt never ends. It only changes names. Modern government debt is not designed to be repaid. It is designed to be rolled over forever. Governments refinance old bonds with new ones. Interest becomes the product, the rent paid for stability. Japan has done this for decades. The United States will do it indefinitely. Investors aren't waiting for repayment. They're waiting for renewal. Government bonds are the foundation of global finance. Banks rely on them. Pensions depend on them. Central banks treat them as money. If governments paid off their debt, the world would lose its most trusted asset. The money supply would shrink. Markets would collapse. So debt continues, rhythmically, deliberately. It becomes the heartbeat of capitalism itself. When we say we owe it to ourselves, that is only partly true. Interest flows upward from workers and taxpayers to asset holders and institutions. Debt transfers wealth across classes, not just countries. Those who own debt are rewarded. Those who service it are trapped. This is why inequality rises alongside global indebtedness. There is no single villain. Not China. Not Wall Street. Not IMF. It is all of us, inside a system where debt became money itself. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But balance depends on belief. And if belief ever breaks, the illusion ends. Debt is, and always has been, a promise that cannot expand forever. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe to the Financial Archive. History already holds the answers. I'll help you uncover them.